We have three short talks today, and each one will have like a little bit more, 10 to 12 minutes set time to talk your topic. I will hold all the questions to the last. And then you can post your question on the chat. We'll bring those up after everyone finishes their presentation. And yeah, let's get started. I think everyone, the presenter, when you do your topic, I've already made you the co-host, so you can share your screen, give us a little introduction of who you are, where you're from, and those type of things, and even some fun facts. That'd be great. Thank you. Let's start it. Oh, I'll go and share my screen. Hi, Jane. You are the next.
Hi, okay, let me share my screen.
Jen is actually coming from outside of our little community. I'm really happy that she's coming to our community to share her skills and her talents. Thank you, Jane.
Oh. All right, can you hear me all right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jen Frachel. I'm coming to you from George Washington University in Washington, D.C. Welcome to Fewer Clicks for Catalogers, using import profiles to streamline cataloging in OMA. So a little bit of background about GW, or George Washington University. We're part of the Washington Research Library Consortia, the WRLC, and we share a consortial instance of ALMA. So we have both an institution zone, so an IZ, and a network zone. And we're on Primo VE instead of Primo with the back office. So with our import profiles, we had three major problems, or three major challenges that we wanted to use these profiles to address. Starting with the most recent one, in March 2020, we found out that we were going to go remote for what we thought would be a few weeks. So we didn't develop a workflow to catalog while we were remote. And then a few months later, as we were gearing up for a partial return to campus, we discovered we had a backlog of 600 to 700 volumes that had been received but hadn't been cataloged. And then these items had notes, and we had 12 days on campus where we were able to access the materials and catalog. Second, we have ongoing projects where project catalogers will come in and non-cataloging librarians and student workers who aren't familiar with ALMA. So we wanted to make sure that their process was streamlined so that they didn't have to do as much work. And then a few years ago, in 2018, we migrated to ALMA. And right before eLuna in 2019, we discovered that we had a few thousand records that were duplicates. We had two other colleges had merged into the GW umbrella. So their library records came over right before we went to ALMA. So there was some problems. Our pre-migration cleanups didn't catch some of these duplicate records. So we had to address this. So our import profile goals essentially are to create a PO, create an inventory, because those are the most click intensive processes, but I'm not going to cover those too much today. The more interesting things that we've been doing are using import profiles to map notes from bib records to holding records, and then that initial cleanup for merging inventory. So let's start with mapping notes. Since we have both an institution zone and a network zone, how notes display in our Primo discovery layer is quite important. It changes how our patrons across the WRLC will see what we have and some of our notes, particularly collection and gift notes. And we want equitable access for everybody across the 15 different library members of the WRLC. So first, I want to show you what the Primo for a non-GW institution zone looks like. And this is super important for us because at GW, we have 3 different institution zones. We have the main library where I work, the law library, and the medical library. And depending upon where our patrons are coming from, they won't have access to the same information. So on the left, you see our holding, or the gift note in the holding record, how that displays in this institution zone Primo. And then on the right, you see what it would look like with just the bib record. And it doesn't display because of the way Primo accesses bib records and displays those in the discovery. So this is what it looks like for our patrons in GW. The source of acquisition under the details is where the bibliographic record notes will display. And up there in the right, you see that it's a local note because you have that little local note temple for the 975, which is our local gift note for the consortia. For mapping these notes in the import profile, we use holding records mapping. So you see that the 985 from the bib record will automatically map to the 852, and then the 975 will map to the 541 in the holdings. As a note, I haven't successfully been able to get all of the subfields for anything other than an 852 to come through. There is a Salesforce ticket in there. I don't know if it's just our production environment or if this is across the board Alma issue, but there is a Salesforce ticket. If you do set up import profiles to do mapping, the second subfield is the one that will carry over. So now, because in our institution zone, the display comes up in source of acquisition under the item, and in non-institution zone Primos, it will do the same. We decided that this is how we want to make sure everything displays. So then it's equitable access. Now here's the merging inventory. This is what was most useful and saved the most time, since we had thousands of records where we would have to move POs, holding information, item information, any kind of portfolios for our finding aids. We have both the item and an electronic portfolio for access to the finding aid, since our special collections and our archives aren't publicly circulating. So back when I did this in fall of 2019, I didn't think ahead to record and document the whole process and take screen caps, but here's the workflow we did. We had to identify duplicates using analytics where we had 2 institution zone records linked up to 1 network zone record. We then therefore had to unlink those institution zone records so that we could do this merge. Otherwise, when it's linked to a network zone record, it doesn't merge the inventory. We exported all of the bib records, used MarcEdit to deduplicate those based upon the OCLC numbers, turned around and just imported it right back in. And it didn't matter so much if it was the best record available, because we were linking or relinking to the network zone. That network zone record would therefore overlay whatever institution zone record we were bringing in. So even if they didn't match 1-to-1, we didn't want to put too much work into it. So we could streamline this whole process. This is how we had our import profile set up. You have to have merging activated for the profile. Otherwise, when you go to manually merge these records, you'll get an error message saying that this import profile doesn't have the permissions. You have to redo this. So we used the record with the most items so that we wouldn't have to have Alma work too hard. But the best part about this was it would automatically delete the orphaned record, because I would probably still be doing this work if I had to move all of the item records and the PO records over to the new record and then go through and delete these thousands of leftover records. When you do this, one of the important things that I told my fellow catalogers that we had to do was make sure that we previewed all of the merges. And you can do this as soon as you say confirm and merge inventory. If you use that preview, it brings down a CSV file, and I always look at it through Excel. So here's the screen cap of that. On that operation, it will tell you exactly what's going to happen. And there, when you see ignore there, that means the records are going to be skipped. Preferred means that's the record that Alma is going to keep, and merge is the one that's going to get deleted. This allowed us to take a good look at anything that may not have been successfully unlinked from the network zone, or any time that there was a false positive, because there's a lot more to this report. You'll see title, identifier information, and this document is from what ended up being the things that we had to manually merge together, which is still a small portion of what we had to do overall. And this, like I said, is one of the best things that we ended up doing, and it saved us the most time and made access to these records a lot better, because when we had two network zone records or two institution zone records linked to one network zone record, both Alma and Primo didn't know how to handle that, and it would make choices that weren't necessarily great. So now our patrons have access to all of these records instead of Primo just not displaying any of these. So if you have any questions, let me know at the end of the presentation, the other two lightning talks, or feel free to email me anytime. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Jen. Next, we have Keegan Osinski from Vanderbilt. Keegan, the floor is yours.
Hello. All right, I'm Keegan Osinski. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the librarian for theology and ethics at Vanderbilt in the Divinity Library. I also work as the public services librarian in the Divinity Library. So this kind of unique position I have, where I both work as a subject liaison and instructional librarian, and then also as a circulation supervisor, public services librarian, means I got the lovely job of coordinating our pickup program for when our building was closed. So I'm going to talk a little bit just about what we did, how we did it, and our varying levels of success. And if you have any questions, go ahead, put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end, or you can email me. My email is there on the screen. So, okay, let me set the stage for you. It is May 2020. We've been out of the office for 10 weeks. And the barest of bare bones staff has been able to come back into the building. And we've been there, checking in all the books that were returned over the last 10 weeks when no one was in the building. We've been there for 2 days. And on May 27th, we get a directive from university administration that we need to have some kind of curbside pickup ready to go by June 1st. So that's 5 days. We put together a crack team of access services people, systems people, and we basically worked nonstop through those 5 days, through the weekend, to make this happen. As I was like thinking about doing this presentation and like preparing, I was just like blown away again. Like, well, first of all, I was like re-traumatized by like remembering what we did that week. But also just very proud of what we were able to accomplish in such a short amount of time. We really came together, we put our heads together. Tao and Jamin were awesome. Everyone like, did their part and we made it happen. So the main thing that we had to do was put together a workflow. So I am the queen of flowcharts. So that was kind of the way that I conceptualized everything that needed to happen to make a pickup plan work. This is kind of what we ended up doing. So part of the problem was we had so many different people working in so many different departments, working in some at home, some on site, and we had to just kind of bring everything together in one kind of streamlined process. So this is what we came up with. We had people submit their request via a form that came up in the catalog, and I'll show you some details of that in a minute. And then it went into SpringShare. So we basically used a combination of Alma functionality and SpringShare, LibAnswers, LibCal to kind of make this all work. So we had a homemade form that was submitted that sent the ticket to LibAnswers, where it was triaged to the appropriate library. So Vanderbilt has 9 different libraries. At first, we were only had the Central and Divinity Library open. It's in one building. And so that's kind of where it started. And then we expanded to all the libraries offering pickup in just 2 weeks from the first day. So the ticket got assigned to the appropriate liaison. And then at that point, because we were e-preferred and e-only, and we wanted to limit the amount of people coming in, and most people didn't want to come on campus. A lot of people were not cleared to be on campus because it was so locked down at that point. We had to check for electronic options. So that meant checking to see if it was available in HathiTrust, checking to see if it was available in the Internet Archive at this time before it was shut down, checking to see if we could purchase an e-copy. So we did a lot of dupes. We bought a lot of duplicate ebooks. So a subject liaison would check all of those things, and if they were able to offer it as an e-resource, they sent that, or we purchased it. If that didn't work, then we sent it on to ILL, and ILL tried to find it, an e-version. If that didn't work, then it got sent on to the on-site pickup folks who would pull the book, package it up, contact the patron with a link to schedule their pickup, and then they would bag it up, check it out to them, and then put it out at the appropriate time. So as you can see, there were a lot of different moving parts, a lot of people moving, a lot of people doing different things. And the most important thing ended up being communication. We also needed to have a flow chart for different kinds of users. So we had users like staff, faculty, and students, and then we also had alumni who were able to request pickup. And then we also had items that lived in off-site storage. So we had another kind of flow chart going on that people would have to go through. So this is what it looked like in the catalog. We were able to put a button in the catalog that would take the user to the homemade form, which looked like, well, So it would take you here, and we had all of this information that no one ever read, of course, because people don't read and you can't make them read, even if you put all the information in front of them, that we would contact them, you know, saying up front, it's going to be some communication here, that we would fulfill by electronic versions whenever possible. So we were, you know, prioritizing e-versions, even if they were requesting the pickup of the print, we would still offer them the e-version if possible. And if it's not available, then we would give you the print version. And then we also let them know that at a certain point that the buildings were open for, you know, if you had an ID card and you could swipe in. Again, people, even up to like last week, I emailed someone and was like, just so you know, we are open. We are encouraging people to come in and do self-checkout. And they're like, oh, great, I didn't realize you were open. Again, they don't read, it's fine. So this is what the form looked like. You needed to have Vanderbilt credentials to log in to even get to the form. And then it would fill in all the bibliographic information straight from the catalog, from the record. And so they just needed to put in their name, their status, meaning if they were a student, a grad student, a faculty, alumni, or whatever. And then that form would send into the LibAnswers. It would create a LibAnswers ticket that looked like this. And that from there, the liaison librarians could triage it, send it to where it belonged based on what library it lived in and what kind of, you know, if it was an alum or a student or whatever. So they had all that information, and then also the MMSI ID, so they could, you know, check it in Alma to make sure it was available and all that kind of stuff. And then from there, the user was sent an email that had information about, you know, we're going to pull it for you, and then they were able to schedule a pickup time using LibCal, the SpringShare LibCal, and that looked like this. We had a little graphic to help them figure out where they can pick it up, because that was still an issue too, was like someone mentioned earlier, the parking situation in Vanderbilt is abhorrent. So trying to figure out where to park and how to get there was kind of a challenge. So we also had this little picture to help them find where their book would be picked up at. So there was a lot of discussion about whether we could use the pickup function in Alma for this versus what we ended up doing, which was kind of like a hybrid situation with LibAnswers. And I think we've learned a lot, and we didn't know this was going to go on for this long. So we thought, you know, maybe we would just offer it through the summer, but then it just kind of kept going. And while the pickup, or what is it called? The pull from shelf function is really useful and would definitely work for this, because we needed to have people from all different departments working on this together. We just needed to make it as easy and accessible as possible for our staff to just make it work. So we had circulation folks who worked with the Alma side of things and fulfillment and, you know, pulling the books and checking them out and that kind of thing. And then we had the liaison folks who were more familiar, who didn't really use Alma very much, who were more familiar with LibAnswers and SpringShare stuff. And so we kind of were, and Gobi, right? So for purchasing the ebook versions, you know, the circulation folks didn't have access to Gobi. So we had to kind of, eventually the moral of the story is we just had to make it work. So that meant doing this hybrid thing. It meant a lot of communication. It meant just everyone doing our best, which is kind of, I feel like, the moral of the story for everyone for this whole ordeal. And at the end of the day, it's kind of funny. This looks like a made up number because this is 4321, but I just looked it up this morning and this is the grand total as of this morning, how many requests that have been submitted through the pickup program. And so this will, and I think I saw also about half of them were fulfilled with actual physical item pickup. So that means about half of them either, didn't get fulfilled or they were fulfilled electronically. So that's a lot, and it's a lot of work. And the way that our staff was able to make it work and come together and provide this access for our users, like in the midst of this crazy time, is just unreal. And I just feel very lucky to have been able to be part of it. And yeah, I think that's my last slide. It sure is. Great, so I'm happy to answer questions at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Keegan. That's a nice story you're telling. That's great. I love the calendars and also the numbers. Yes. Now let's move on to Jake and Dajin. Here you are.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my presentation up here. Okay. Let's share screen. Whiteboard. Okay, we'll try this. No, that's not what we wanted. I'm sorry. All right. Where is my... It's not going to be my... Okay, we'll try this. I don't know if this is going to help at all, but can you see my presentation here? Okay, all right. I'm going to be presenting a little bit later in this process. Dajin is going to be presenting before me, but just as a matter of introduction, I'm Jake Schaub. I'm the music cataloging librarian at Vanderbilt University in the Wilson Music Library, and I played a part in this project, but I'm going to let Dajin introduce himself and bring us into the presentation.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dajin Sun, Director of Metadata Services at Vanderbilt Libraries. I'll give a quick overview of our project, and Jake will take you into our project. Next slide, please. We utilize the wide staff availability at the time of a COVID lockdown, and we launched the enumeration project. The goal of the project was to fix item call number problems that prevent our users from finding individual issues of journals or part of a monographic set. And at the very beginning, we have over 1 million records to work with. Next, please. So our staffing and our workflow. At the very beginning, we trained about 21 staff members across the library. And we also have 5 professional catalogers assigned on the project. Soon after the start, and more staff joined the project. And at the highest point, we have about 40 people working on the project. Our workflow basically consists of 2 parts, and frontline staff working with GRIMA, and behind them, catalogers focusing on resolving the problem reported from the frontline staff. With that, and Jake will take you into our project.
All right. As a brief overview as to what the problem was, we migrated at Vanderbilt to Alma from CIRCE on July 23rd, 2018. It's a date that's emblazoned on the minds of anyone who was there to see this happen. And just as a matter of introduction, this is a problem that arose purely because we migrated to Alma from CIRCE. Every institution is going to have their own issues that confront them. Say if you migrated from Sierra, maybe your bound widths did something particularly interesting overnight. But enumeration is something that affected us because of the CIRCE change. When you move from one system to another, we have to crosswalk the data, obviously, and a lot of that is going to be affected by past data quality of legacy data, which could go back decades and could have anything in it. And of course, the difference in software structure. Since CERFC and ALMA are structured differently, the crux arose in that ALMA requires a holdings record for each and every physical item in a collection, whereas CERFC did not. There were holdings records in CERFC, but they were quasi-ancillary, and individual items could be attached directly to bibs in CERFC. So when you change systems and the ex libris migration algorithm goes into effect, if it encountered data it found confusing, it often auto-generated new holdings records for us. In most cases, this would be fine, but in many cases, it was not. So there were a few problems that came up. The volume level data from CERFC did transfer over, but not exactly where we expected it to be. And it was not in the correct place in the new records. So often the public had difficulty identifying what we hold and how to request it if it was off-site. You could still find this information if you delved really in depth within each item record within Primo, but it was laborious, and often these different volumes were presented in a completely random order. So if you were looking for volume 34, for example, of a 110 volume set, you might be looking for a really long time before you found volume 34. Also, there was the complication in that the computer system would understand, say you had a 12 volume set, it would not view it as, oh, you have volumes 1 through 12. What it understood the situation to be is that you have 12 identical copies of some same thing. This matters if you're trying to request something from offsite and you want to have requested volumes 3 and 4. Well, you can't request more than one volume, one copy of something, so you're stuck. Pick 3 or 4, you don't get both. Just the way it is. We had some issues with pilfered call numbers, as we called them, when the volume number from an individual item would be applied to all volumes in that entire set. We had to deal with that. We often had items attached to the wrong holdings records. We had the empty library, which would make its appearance whenever the data was ambiguous at the point of migration, and we had that happen with a whole lot of the microfilm. We had Franken records, which is when you have multiple holdings records get sliced and diced and ground up and put into a sausage casing and presented to you in this holdings record, and you're left wondering what exactly happened here. And then, of course, the labels would not print correctly if the volume number was not in the right place in the record. So we had lots of complaints coming in, mostly from faculty, and they were emailing our head university librarian personally about this. We knew we had to deal with this as quickly as we could. So what needs to be done? There were 2 discoveries. We were new to ALMA at this point, so a lot of these may be obvious to everyone who had been in ALMA for a while. But first of all, we knew that since our volume information had been transferred to the item call number, we knew that if the item call number had anything in it at all, it might be a pretty good indication that something had gone wrong in migration. So we could hone in on that. And there was about 1.1 million items right after migration. We also learned that if we populated the item description field with volume level data, that would solve almost all of our problems right there. The public would know which volume was which, they could request individual ones, and the system would understand the situation as well. So the solution seemed easy. In 2019, early, we decided that, you can just simply transfer part of the item call number to the description, and there it is. And so as a stopgap measure, we trained staff from the various divisional libraries to address this issue on a case-by-case basis as complaints arose. You don't want to be correcting 1.1 million records by hand. Otherwise, that's not a very good use of staff time, but at least it bought us a little time. In the meantime, we pursued an automated solution. And this was based on what we call the GRIMA. And this is inspired in major part by API tools that were developed by the University of Kentucky, who are also called GRIMAs. For those of you who've been in eBUG a while, there was a presentation a number of years ago on this very tool, and that's where I first learned of it, and it helped me regain my faith in the universe and gave us a path forward. But the University of Kentucky didn't have one that did exactly what we wanted it to do for our case, because they migrated from Voyager. They did not migrate from Sierra. It was not as much of an issue with them. So we developed one. I put together the logic for it. Dale Poulter put together the coding for it. And it takes a bib record MMS ID as input. It compares data in the item call number with data in its associated holdings record. And for each item associated with that bib record MMS ID, it undertakes this comparison and selectively moves part of the data to the description field. So it does basically what we trained the staff to do by hand. However, this operates on very, very strict criteria because we didn't want collateral damage. And so if the table is not set exactly as the GRIMA wants it, it will pull the Diva Act. It will stick its nose in the air and it won't do anything. So you can see in the example on the right-hand side of the screen, we entered an MMS ID and there were two items on this record. One of them already had a populated description field, so we weren't going to overwrite that. So it did nothing. And the other one, it corrected because it decided it was acceptable to take further action. Why not a fully automated solution? Too many weird situations. And I have a few examples here. We have, first on the upper left, we have a case where we had a Dewey copy of an item, and we had an LC copy of the item, and Alma mushed them together at migration into a single holdings record. Below that, we have the empty library, and the GRIMA cannot deal with that. We also have the volume 56, etc. That's almost like an old cataloger's instruction that dates probably from decades and decades ago, but they're still in the system and the GRIMA can't deal with that either. And then below that, we have miscoded subfields that would have to be fixed by hand. By a rough estimate, only about 50% of these eligible records could be GRIMA'd without any further changes. So who could work on this? We did have some training for the hand fixing before, and user roles are pretty limited at Vanderbilt for, in most things, Alma-wise, but almost everyone can work on item records themselves, and anybody could work on the GRIMA. As I said before, we had what we at the time called Tier 1 training, where about 30 staff were trained to identify the problem and what would fix the problem. And with this new GRIMA in place, which we probably would just keep with the cataloging staff just to keep things moving, we thought we had a project that we could continue for a few years incrementally and it would be fine. And enter COVID and we had a staff. We locked down in March 2020 due to a nice little gift that some returning students from Barcelona brought back from spring break. And we were not allowed on campus for a quite amount of time after that, as Keegan alluded to in her presentation. We had to quickly develop a general plan and training materials because we didn't know what the administration's policies on staff retention were going to be. We wanted to employ as many people as quickly as we could. We were able to train about 21 staff at the time, and more came into the picture later. Mostly circulation and technical services people who couldn't do their regular jobs. To work with the new GRIMA, they came from all over the place, as you can see, and we had 5 main catalogers also from all over the place who oversaw the final cleanup. We had ALMA reports that we put together with analytics that would be updated daily, as analytics does, to find those eligible records divided by the divisional library, by location, and by the classification scheme to try to narrow this problem down into digestible chunks. Managers of the different locations would distribute Excel lists, assignments, so to speak, to the individual staff who would go down their list, examine the record, run the GRIMA. If the GRIMA worked and everything was clean, great, mark it down, go on to the next one. If the GRIMA did not work, or if you encountered a red flag, and they trained on red flags, you enter that MMS ID into another form that gets fed to the catalogers who will research it. And the red flags, if you found something that had no holdings attached to it, something's probably wrong. If there is an enumeration in the root call number, maybe something went wrong, not necessarily, but maybe. And the staff would have to investigate each problem record and take further action. Usually it was just fixing spacing or reattaching the holdings to the items to a different holdings record and running the GRIMA again. And usually that solved it, but not everything. So we were able to correct over 800,000 records this way. User access was vastly improved. We still get complaints, but not about this. It's about other things. And we lost no staff in the process. And I'm going to hand it back to Dajin.
Okay, with great success, we also experienced many challenges. Just to mention a few, first of all, trained staff who had no background in working with catalog records and have them learn what problem to report, when to report them. It's no small task. The GRIMA, as you heard, is very effective and accelerate the process of our project, but it has a limit. It doesn't handle and SUDOC number because the difference in format and spacing. So we excluded all the government documents from the project. Since there are many people, different people working from different places at a different pace, keeping track of the overall workflow and making sure every staff inputs their correct information on the shared spreadsheets is another huge challenge. Also, avoiding duplication of individual staff efforts and making sure making them feel comfortable working on records beyond their collections. Last but not least, and we have some records which require review of physical pieces. There's no way you can solve problem without looking at the pieces because, for example, if the call number, as you heard, at the end of the URL indicate the enumeration, the volume or numbering. What if there's no volume in numbering? And also, what if there, there's a range of numbering? So in these cases, we have to rely on people working in the collections and pull them up and arrange to have a catalog review and resolve them. Happily, and we managed to meet all these challenges. So that's how we made our success. Next, please. Where are we now with our project and when do we expect to complete the project? We still have a small number of complex or problematic records and which can only be resolved by looking at the physical pieces, and we'll leave that as last part. And we made arrangement for staff in the host collection working with assigned cataloger, one-on-one this relationship, and work out their schedule and to get these resolved gradually or eventually. Two major collections, our law library and our special collections, were not part of the project at the very beginning, but they are now started working on their record for a project. They plan to get their part of work done by the end of the summer. So I think it's reasonable or safe to say we expected to get the complete project done after summer or into the fall. With this, we end our talk and we open the floor for questions. And our contact information are here. So if you have more questions, you'd like to contact us outside after the conference, and here's our contact info.
Thank you, Dajin and Jake. Those are great and a good way to use technology to get more people involved and to improve our metadata. While everyone cannot come to the library, we still work to improve the library services. Yes, great. And see, do we have questions? I didn't see anything posted on the chat, but if you have, you can just unmute yourself ask questions and then post it on the chats. And or if you rather just send individual emails and ask individual persons for their questions, feel free to do so. And since I didn't see questions coming in, we've already had 4 hours of programs today, and we have so many people stayed with us for 4 hours, and thank you so much. I think I'm going to call a break for today. So we're finishing today's program, and we do have more programs coming on Wednesday and Friday, and look forward to seeing you all again. And based on the evaluation, I really enjoyed the morning session, and every presentation, the trainings, the keynotes, and are great. Based on the evaluation form I saw, the submitted in, I see people are sharing the same thoughts as I'm feeling. So great. I'll post again the evaluation form, and so send your evaluation, and look forward to seeing you on Wednesday. Everyone have a good time, good break. You deserve a break. It's already 4 hours. Thank you.